Hey folks, it's Nate, and welcome to today's IronSysAdmin open source news recap for the week of October 31st. It's Halloween, folks. All right, first of all, I want to remind you yet again that if you're in the northeastern PA region, you should absolutely mark your calendar for November 8th for the DevCon 610 pub crawl CTF. November 8th at noon. I'll put a link to where you can register and find more information in the description of today's video. Now let's get on with the news. Okay, I don't have a ton of news for today, so maybe I'll just pontificate more. I don't know. Maybe it'll be a short show. Yeah, right. Like I can make a short show. All right, so our first article comes from, what is this? Comes from Tom's Hardware, and the headline is, nearly 90% of Windows games now run on Linux, latest data shows. As Windows 10 dies, gaming on Linux is more viable than ever. I love this headline because I've been engaged in so many conversations with folks online around the end of Windows 10, and all of them say Linux isn't there yet. You can't tell me that you can run a Linux desktop in place of your Windows machine. Well, I've been saying for quite a while now that for gaming, you absolutely can. Now, there are some caveats there. You may miss out on those AAA titles that depend on kernel-level anti-cheat because a lot of those flat out refuse to work on Linux. It's not that they can't. It's that the game developers think Linux is just a bunch of hackers and they don't want their game to run there. It's so weird. I don't know why you would shun an entire ecosystem, an entire niche of your customer base. I mean, that means you can't run on a Steam Deck. Why? Why would you make your game so it doesn't run on one of the most popular gaming handhelds? The article goes into some details about how they're getting this, whether it works or doesn't work, because there's a whole lot of gray area when it comes to gaming on Linux and whether the game works or does not work, right? I mean, fire up any game on your Steam Deck and you'll get that little warning at the beginning that tells you what you can expect out of this particular game. And to be honest, some games work really, really well. You don't even realize that you're running on not on the operating system that they were designed to run on. Other games are a little finicky, but I've said this before on this podcast, and I've said it to many people online in various different venues. Gaming on Linux feels like a solved problem at this point. The Proton compatibility layer that you leverage when you're using a Steam Deck, it just works for so many games. Now, like I said, there are exceptions there, but I can't tell you the last time I ran into a game that I absolutely could not run on Linux, with the exception of VR. I still have this weird performance problem with VR. I'm told that other folks are able to game playing VR on Linux without trouble. I just haven't gotten there yet. So hopefully I can get that solved, and then I can actually take one more thing out of the I need Windows to run this list on my personal system. But anyway, if you're not gaming on Linux, you should give it a shot. We've got support on the Linux side for most popular GPUs. You've got AMD, you've got NVIDIA. Bazzite, the particular, the spin that I like to game on, that I'm actually recording today's show on, you can get a spin of it that either uses the NVIDIA driver baked in or the AMD driver baked in, and you can pick what desktop environment you want, and you just lay the image down and off you go. You boot the thing up the first time, and you can play games. I have a video on the YouTube channel, if you're listening to me audio only, where I take my Alienware gaming rig and finally decide Windows is becoming my second-class citizen, and I completely do all the reinstalls of both operating systems to show you basically how easy it is to get up and running on Bazzite. So check that out if you're curious. All right, our next article comes from the News Stack. The News Stack. I think it's the News Stack based on the colors. Anyway, Ubuntu 25.10 ships without X11. I know there's a bunch of controversy about this online for some strange reason. I haven't dug into it, but it sounds like the internet is mad that X11 is going away. And for some reason, they're mad at Red Hat for it. I don't know. I don't get it. I really don't get it. But X11 is kind of the old platform at this point for your window environment on a Linux desktop. Some distributions are still using X11. A lot of us have moved to Wayland. That includes Red Hat, it includes Fedora, and now it includes Ubuntu, and there's a bunch of others on that list. X11 just wasn't getting development anymore, and part of that were conscious decisions. Part of that were because the code base was old or something. I don't know. I don't know all the details, but I know that it was not being well maintained. There were basically bug fixes going into it and not feature fixes or feature improvements. And Wayland replaces X11, and it's actually pretty good at it. Now, there are a bunch of older applications that still require X11, applications that, for whatever reason, have not moved over to Wayland. And that, I think, is sort of part of the issue here, right? So if you depend on apps that still need the old X11 libraries, then if you're on Ubuntu, then if you go to 25.10, you're going to be out of luck. But you've already been out of luck if you're on Fedora. You've already been out of luck if you're on RHEL. And like I said, a number of other distributions that have already made the move. But I digress. There are a number of other interesting features in Ubuntu 25.10, such as GNOME 49. Let's see. I'm actually reading this right now because I was focused so much on the X11 thing. Kernel 617, which I believe is cutting edge at this point. Updates to some development toolchain stuff. A/B booting. What's that? A new feature for Raspberry Pi devices prevents a broken update from preventing the system from booting. That's kind of cool. Secure boot. apt 3.1. sudo rs. Oh, a Rust-based implementation of sudo. This is something I need to look more into. I saw it in another one of my headlines that I decided not to cover today, and I'm kind of curious now. All right, moving on to another one of my favorite topics, and that is the open and free internet. Did you know that there's a grant that funds open internet initiatives? I didn't. Now I do. So, NLNet Foundation. NL? I guess that's NL. It's not an I, is it? I think it's an L. The NLNet Foundation reports on the NGL0, which is a fund that's used to further the open internet. They funded 29 projects for pretty much every layer of the stack, from hardware to infrastructure, all the way up to web frameworks and applications. And this article goes into what those projects are, and it gives you a little more background as to what exactly this fund is all about. But you can see here, if you look at the list of these projects, there are routing protocols, there are manufacturers like hardware manufacturers, software engineering protocols, operating systems, and firmware virtualization. I mean, when I say every layer, I mean every layer. There's data and AI here, vertical use cases, like there's a mention of a Drupal activity plug social recipe. So yeah, I think this is actually kind of cool that there's actually a fund that's out there to try to help fund open protocols and open initiatives that are keeping the internet open and usable as a digital commons, which pretty darn cool. All right, and my last article today is actually from Ars Technica, and it's not really a technology article. It's Stranger Things, Season 5. I just saw it got announced. Pretty cool. It's coming out in November. Now, if you've kept track of Stranger Things, it started in 2016, and the initial season of this series was so compelling and so, riveting. It really caught people's attention because it was based in the 80s, which caught kind of the target audience, right? Folks who grew up in the 80s saw a lot of nostalgia in these in the episodes of season 1. It was focused around a bunch of nerds, kids who play Dungeons and Dragons, so it caught a lot of folks that might be watching this sort of a show, which is why I thought I might cover it today. I've been a big fan of this series since it came out, and I've been waiting, right, for more content. I feel like it's been a while since season 4. This hasn't been an every year sort of series. They've kind of come and gone, and the kids that were featured in the first season, I swear they look like they're 42 now. These kids have grown up quite a bit because it's been almost 10 years since the first season debuted. If you go back and look at the first season, these kids look like little tiny Kids, I think they're supposed to be like pre-teenaged in the first season, and now they are obviously adults, but they're being portrayed, I think, as high schoolers, which you can do in the movies relatively easily with makeup and whatnot. But yeah, it's pretty crazy how old these kids look now compared to that first season. But anyway, go watch the trailer. It's linked in the Ars Technica article. It looks like the antagonist from season 4 is back. I thought they had killed him, but it sure looks like the same guy there in that picture. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be an interesting season, and we don't have to wait very long. It's going to come out early in November, so awesome. All right, and that is it for today's news recap. I hope you guys have enjoyed. I made a mention earlier in the episode that folks might be listening audio only. That's because I have experimentally started listing this show as a podcast as well. Now, those of you who've been with me for a long time might remember that this whole initiative, the IronSysAdmin, started out as a podcast back in like 2017, and we were primarily an audio only outlet for quite some time. And I've kind of branched into the YouTube stuff. And of course, the podcast went away. Well, now that I'm doing this recap, I've had a couple folks ask me, would I be willing to release this as a podcast as well? So why not? I'm actually hosting the podcast on a thing called Castopod, which is a self-hosted and federated platform for hosting your podcasts. And that's publishing out to things like Apple Podcasts and Spotify and whatnot all over again. I've gone back in time, folks. I'm podcasting again. Anyway, I hope you guys have enjoyed today's show. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in a week. Happy Halloween.